Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro. Now, you've been watching these videos, you've seen me talk a lot about maintenance of stormwater treatment assets, and so we are here at the Stormwater 2016 conference on the Gold Coast with Andrew Thomas. So Andrew is a PhD student at Melbourne Uni. I happened to see your presentation yesterday afternoon, and it was about maintenance. But within whereas I come at this maintenance topic from having spent time in various local governments, you are coming at this from a research point of view. You're doing a PhD trying to look at why maintenance of stormwater treatment assets isn't maybe where it should be. What are the barriers? What's going on here? And trying to get into this and unpack some of this stuff that we kind of intuitively know or think we know in the industry. But do that with a kind of a scientific lens and try and get this in some of the literature so we've got some confidence. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, okay. So what you said before, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence out there that suggests that the maintenance of these assets perhaps isn't where it should be.
Okay.
So I guess there are two components. The first component of my research was to actually do some review the literature and look around for evidence that this is actually the case.
Okay.
But the main thrust is really to start engaging with professionals in local government who are responsible for maintenance in terms of actually doing that maintenance.
Okay.
Or whether they're responsible for planning it ahead, maintenance budgets, asset management, and also in the planning side as well about how those stormwater control measure assets are handed over to council in a manner that is actually constructive so that they know what to do with these assets.
Okay.
So it's more looking at, that's the main thrust, but sitting behind that is looking at trying to collate some of the data that's out there that hasn't been published or collated in one spot about just how well or not we're maintaining these assets.
Okay, so you've got a few different stages to this research. You're partway through it.
Yep.
What are what are some things that are jumping out at you as interesting things you've learned, or stuff that you're like, I wonder what else we can find out about that?
Okay, well, one of the interesting things was, first of all, before we engaged in the social, if you like, or the organisational side of the social science side, we actually went out there and did a bit of a study for some councils in Melbourne, and just asked them for their asset condition data.
Okay.
Now, we went to 7 councils, and those councils were what we would consider to be leading councils in this kind of work, on this kind of assets. And only 3 of them could give us data, and those that did, we were looking at, in one case, over half of their assets were in poor condition because of lack of maintenance. And there were other reasons, but that was the leading cause for 2 of them. And the third one, it was equal with design. Okay. So even though I knew that there was a problem like most people do, I didn't realise it was quite that high.
Yeah, okay. So it's coming to you and you're going, wow, it really is. And I think this is something that attracts me to why I'm interested in maintenance as a topic to try and work on and try and improve. Because there are these different sections. If you want to improve the overall practice of water sensitive urban design, you can come in at these different parts. You can come in at the design and try and improve practice. You can come in at construction, try and improve practice. You can come in at maintenance. And I think one of the reasons that the maintenance interests me is that it's this continuous opportunity for things to fall over. So say if you had 10 assets and you designed 3 of them wrong and 7 of them right, then at the end of that, design happens once. So you still have 7 good assets. And then you come to construction and you maybe construct 1 of them wrong and construct 6 of them right. Then you just have 6 good assets. But if you maintain then, say 1 of them right, then you have 5 good assets. But the next year you might still only maintain maintain 1 of them wrong, you have 5 good assets. Maintenance has this, you have to keep getting it right time after time after time after time. So it's got this higher, to me it feels like this higher opportunity to have an effect. I don't think it's actually, people sometimes look at maintenance of these assets and think they're really prone to failure. I don't think that's the case. I think they're actually surprisingly resilient. It's just that their time frame to be able to fail is from now until eternity.
Well, you're 30 years at least, depending on the asset.
Whatever the life cycle is.
Yeah, and what's interesting is you're right. What we found was that, occasionally the planning decisions weren't great, and that led to a poor outcome in construction as well and design. But maintenance was up there over 50% for one council and almost 50% for another. So those other good assets that got through that system fine are being taken out by a lack of maintenance. So that seems to be the case.
So you talked in your presentation then about, I think it's more in your upcoming phases of research, about now trying to pick into what is the cause of that. particular those maintenance failures and maintenance successes by inverse, I suppose. What are some of the things that you are looking at as potential problems there?
Okay, so what I'm not doing is actually looking at the way maintenance is being done in the physical sense. What I'm doing is going out there and engaging those professionals, like I said before. And the reason for that is that even if their perceptions are not completely accurate, ultimately maintenance is a human-driven system. And what they believe is the case is where they base their decisions.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. So before I got into this, I was actually doing a master's research project looking at the performance of a given constructed wetland and getting into the science and the statistical modelling and stuff. But in that process, while working for Wollongong Council, I realised that, there's work to be done, but actually doing the asset management plan for Wollongong Council and engaging with the infrastructure staff, it occurred to me that the biggest problem was actually how well they were being maintained or lack thereof. And it's, the barriers, it might seem obvious, but it hasn't been done where we actually approach those who do the work or who are somehow involved in it and actually ask them, how hard is it to do your job and why? So that's the thrust of it.
Which is, and I like the fact that you're attempting to do this and then to make that information available, because I think there's elements of it anecdotally, I might personally have had the opportunity to go and ask questions of certain maintenance people and councils that I've been involved with, but does that information then get available to the broader public? No. So then everyone repeats the same process. One after another. So I like the fact that you're trying to, as best you can within ethics and confidentiality and the like, to go and find this stuff out and then make it available.
The key thing here is that if the patterns that we got from our little mini study with those 7 councils is accurate, and given that they are councils that we know, one of them actually won an award recently for the way that they manage their assets. If the chances of it being not representative of the broader population, it's more likely to be that they're more likely to show a more positive outcome. So it's probably worse. And
so you said this yesterday, and it twisted my head for a little bit. So say that to me again.
So the bias, what we did, is probably biased towards a more positive outcome because we engaged councils that we knew were doing a pretty good job relative to everybody else. So it's likely that many councils are actually doing a lot worse than what they are.
I see what you're saying.
So, and what we sadly often when you come to a tragedy of the commons. So it's a common good rather than it's not like an iPhone that you go and buy. Water and natural resources are a common good. So it's difficult to get action unless you can demonstrate that there is a crisis. So that's the thrust of that, I guess, is to show people that we're investing a lot of money in the research and the building of these devices, but then we're letting them fall away, which is, apart from the environmental problems and the health issues that come with dirty waterways and stuff, that's pointing to a waste of public and private funding as well. So we're trying to demonstrate that, there's a bit of an issue here. Actually, it's probably more than a bit of an issue. And then providing information behind why this is occurring. So it would be easy to blame councils and just say, the managers don't care, but it's actually quite more complex than that.
You're saying to me when we were chatting this morning that you're finding this more and more interesting the deeper that you get into it, and that it's becoming, like in your presentation yesterday, you used the term a wicked problem. Because this isn't as simple as, the maintenance staff don't know what they're doing or something like that. There are elements of, well, which department is most appropriate for this? And is there a budget? And historically, have we seen these assets work or not work? So how confident do we feel? Because this is something I'm aware of, is like, I think there's a cognitive bias here. If I try and put myself in the shoes of a maintenance person who doesn't yet have the budget to maintain this asset class, but say they are a stormwater maintenance person. So in that situation, say that council has 50 stormwater control measures in your terminology, or kind of water sensitive urban design assets. That council, if they don't yet have the dedicated budget, but those assets are out there. If something goes wrong and there's a public complaint, that's going to come to someone in the council. And so it'll come to this stormwater person. And if they don't already have the dedicated budget, then they'll find out about that. They'll get the phone call, they'll get the email forwarded to them, whatever it is, saying, hey, we've got a problem. And they'll go out and they'll see this tough failed asset. And rightly go, okay, I have a problem here. But until you have this cyclical thing where until you have a budget, you don't have any impetus to go out and look at necessarily your whole asset base. If your job is to look after another asset type and you're just accidentally getting these public requests to do work, you don't have an impetus to go out and look at your whole asset base. So you might have 100 assets, of which 50 might be good and 50 might be bad, but there's a bias here that you are far more likely to see the bad stuff because you're busy doing this other asset class most of the time, and the only reason you see this asset class is when there's a public complaint, and a public complaint will be about a bad asset. Yeah. I think there's some cognitive biases that play into this. There's elements of this that are wicked, aren't there?
Yeah, well, wicked's actually, and it sounds a bit funny, but it's actually a policy term that's defined by the federal government. And it's a policy term, and it means a problem that has multiple causes that are often interrelated, so they're not necessarily independent. And then you've got different levels of stakeholder engagement and also governance and things like that. So it's one of those problems that has multiple causes and they're always not clear. Okay. And that's why we're actually going out, and the first stage of the research in terms of engaging with the professionals is what we call exploration. We assume nothing and we just ask them a bunch of open questions.
Yep.
And we are getting some interesting responses back. And while maintenance sounds boring, we start to find out issues that go beyond just funding, but you've got politics comes into it.
It gets really interesting when you go into these deeper things, doesn't it?
It's actually becoming very like a bit of a drama. You've got people doing things that they shouldn't. Why are they doing them? It's got professional bias and all sorts of things.
And even if those things seem like they might not be the right thing to do, but there might be logical reasons.
Oh, there's good reasons
in the situation that. In the context of I don't have a maintenance budget and there's a public complaint, it might be the logical decision from there, but it's not the logical decision from what's best for this asset.
No. One classic example, I can't say where I got this from, but one of the interviewees I spoke with said he realised that the maintenance crews were going out to maintain rain gardens.
Yep.
But what they were doing was actually going out there and pulling out the functional vegetation because they had no idea that was what it was supposed to do. They just had this job to maintain this asset that they didn't understand.
That's really similar to stories that I've heard from up here, from what was actually really quite a high-profile water sense suburban design site going back some years, where the developer did a really good job getting it in the ground, construction was really good, systems got established well, and then weren't getting council maintenance immediately, began to get overgrown. Eventually, at some point, there's a public complaint about it being overgrown, and some well-meaning maintenance crews go in there and slash stuff because that's it tidies up. Yep. The public complaint was it's messy, and that fixes the fact that it's messy. But of course, then you open up all this space for weeds to get in, and the problem proliferates and it gets worse. But the decision was logical at the time.
That's a really interesting point. It covers two areas. One, those council people thought they were doing the right thing. It's a knowledge issue. It's not their fault. They don't know. The second issue is that the community probably didn't realise what that asset was for, and that's one of the fundamental problems. So if you go out to someone and you say, do you know what a road is? They'll probably be offended if you ask them such a stupid question.
Fair enough.
That's a typical asset, buildings, and then you've got stormwater drains. People know what they are, and sewerage. But if you go out in the street and you ask someone, so what do you think of those biofiltration systems? Most people are going to go, what are you talking about?
Yep.
And that's one of the key problems with these assets, is that if the community is not aware of them, they make complaints when perhaps they don't need to. And there's very little political, because local councils are political organisations, that's the nature of them.
Well, it's when you look at...
there's no drive for it.
Well, yeah, and when you look at... local councils are really political, because when you look at the electoral boundaries, and look at the number of people in any given little electorate or division within a local government, it's actually not that many. It's sometimes only a few thousand residents that a single councillor's representing. So of course councils react to what residents say because they're so closely connected to vote. Really, one vote really actually matters at the local government level.
That's how politics works. I mean, the politician is only responding to the community, which is actually their job. I think one of the key areas that we're not doing so well in terms of the stormwater industry, is actually educating the public on how these systems work. And how can we expect them to understand assets that themselves have only been around for maybe 40 years tops, in any real numbers, not even that long, when roads have been around for thousands of years. So really one of the things that we're probably not doing well enough is educating the community on why what these assets even are and why we put them in.
Sure.
And let them make an informed decision about whether or not they want them.
Sure. That's awesome. So, look, thank you for taking time to have a chat and talk on things maintenance. As you can tell, I can talk about this all day, and we could just keep doing this, I'm sure.
You could never shut me up.
Yeah, I can tell that we're on the same boat there. Yeah. I think, judging by our conversation earlier today, you're like actively looking for anyone, I suppose, who can contribute. Do you want to put out a shout out to anyone in this video who might be able to help with your research? You can do
what we're after. When it comes to the research, is we really need to get a hold of council asset condition data if they have it.
Okay.
That's really important because that provides a basis for the crisis, and it is a crisis if the data shows that, but it currently is.
Yep.
And that's the basis for doing the rest of it and getting action on this maintenance issue. And what that means is that if you work for a local council, you can contact me. How are we going to get them the contact details?
That's really easy. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I can put this in the comments, in the description below the video. If you're watching this on the Ideanthro website, it's in the blog post below. We'll make sure we'll link that up.
So you can send that to me, but one of the things you do is when you contact me, just say that your council may have that data. For ethical reasons, don't send it to me. What I need to do is then contact the person who contacts me and make sure that they have permission from their council, from their executive, so that they don't get into trouble, because this data can be very sensitive.
And then you treat it anonymously, because yesterday you showed a couple of graphs of really, really rolled up data, but it was completely anonymous. I had no idea who those three councils were. So
those three councils were just called Council A, B and C, and it's really important if you do supply me with information that you do get that permission, because it's bad for you if it goes wrong, but it's also bad for the reputation of my university if we publish data that we're not supposed to have, because we want to keep doing research and we need people's trust. But otherwise, really need that data.
By all means, besides that, data.
So asset condition data, if your council's run an asset condition audit and just audited all their assets, or got a consultant or done it in-house. And the other thing we're going to do is move into phase 3 of the research. So we're 80% through the exploration, where we find out what the potential problems are. We now need to score those. So we do a different type of survey that we send out en masse across the country to as many councils as we can, and ask them all these questions and see which ones are the most important barriers.
And what sorts? So you're interested in, for that survey, council people who are in some way connected to maintenance? It doesn't have to be like the guy on the tools on the ground.
No, but
as long as you've got some connection to maintenance.
I mean, even executive management, they're hardest to nail down, and politicians almost impossible. But anyone who's in any way involved in the maintenance process, whether it's handing over the asset from in the planning and development section, when you hand an asset over from a developer to council, whether it's capital works, whether you're involved in developing asset management budgets and planning, so it might be you might look after the asset management plan, and they're interesting too, and whether or not you actually do the maintenance or supervise crews who do. So that anyone is involved in some way.
Okay, wicked.
Great.
Cool. Thank you for taking the time to have a chat. If you've got data, by all means, shoot it Andrew's way.
Please do.
But yeah, cool.
But don't forget to get your permission.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks, mate.
Cheers.